Shanti, are you all happy? So, Navratri celebrations is going on in India. So, as the name denotes, Navratri means 9 nights. What's so special about 9 nights? So, furious fight happens between goddess Durga and Mahishasuran for these 9 nights. So, what would they do in the daytime? So, how come a fight happens only in the night? That true for 9 nights in a row. So, it obviously means there is something hidden. It's not the direct meaning. They don't fight for just 9 nights. So, the night refers to the night of Brahma as mentioned in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So for that we need to understand the world geography and history. So this is the time cycle of the world. It consists of just 5,000 years. The first 5,000 years was heaven, and the next 5,000 years is hell. Yes, we are in hell now. After the completion of the last 2,500 years, it again enters the heaven. So this 5,000 year time cycle is called a kalpa. So this heaven, the first 2,500 years, is called the day of Brahma, and the last 2,500 years is called the night of Brahma. The reason for that is usually during daytime we'll be aware of what's going on around us and we will be aware of who we are. But in the night we forget who we are because we are fast asleep. So likewise, in this day of Brahma in heaven, we all are aware of who we truly are. That is, we will be aware of that we are actually imperishable soul that shines like a tiny star in between the eyebrows. That's why Hindus have this habit of wearing bindis in between the eyebrows, a red dot. But in hell, we forget the fact that we are in fact souls. Instead, we wrongly considered ourselves to be this perishable body. So, we become addicted to the sensual pleasures in hell, because of which we become slaves for the 5 vices: lust, anger, greed, attachment, and ego. So these 5 vices that's present in men and in women, they are collectively called the 10-headed Ravan. So there is no human with 10 heads as mentioned in Ramayana. So it's just it symbolizes something. That's it. That didn't happen exactly as such. Not only Ramayana, the same applies to Mahabharata, Gita, Bible, Quran, any religious text. They were not history books to denote the things that happened in the past. Instead, they were religious scriptures that foretells what's going to happen in the future in the form of a story. We souls are truly Sitas. These souls are kidnapped by Ravan in hell. That is, we become slaves to Ravan. So God, Shiva, he himself comes because he's the only one who doesn't take birth like us as humans. Instead, he enters an old man's body directly and starts giving this teaching that reveals who we truly are. And he says about this time cycle. So hell consists of the first 2 yugas, Satyuga and Treta Yuga. And hell comprises of the last two yugas, Dwapar Yuga and Kali Yuga. But in religious scriptures, it is wrongly mentioned as the time span of every yugas to be lakhs of years. But in reality, it's just 1250 years. Each yuga consists of just 1250 years, because the whole kalpa itself consists of just 5000 years. So we are actually sleeping. That is, while in heaven we were soul conscious, after coming to hell we forget that we are souls. Instead we started consider ourselves to be this perishable body, which means we become body conscious, which means we are sleeping. The soul is sleeping without even being aware of who we are. So that's why this is called the night of Brahma. So God enters an old man's body and he names that old man as Brahma. And whoever listens to the knowledge of God Shiva through the mouth of Brahma, they are the true Brahmins. So this is how God creates through Brahma. First he creates Brahmins. So those who take this knowledge are called the true Brahmins. So if you are listening to this knowledge for the first time, you have taken birth as Brahmin. So only Brahmins can enter heaven. That is, only those who take this knowledge can enter heaven. So of course, if you take even a little bit of this knowledge, you will definitely enter heaven. But the real question is, what post or what status we will claim in heaven? Because it's a kingdom, so there will be kings and queens and subjects. Among subjects there will be very rich subjects, somewhat rich subjects, and rich subjects. Of course there won't be anybody poor, because it is heaven. So it is filled with palaces made of gold and diamonds. So, and not only that, even animals, they would be very loving to each other. Lion and cow, they both take water from the same pond simultaneously, which means they don't feed on other animals. Instead they feed on plants. That's why nobody will cause any harm to anybody. The main reason it was heaven, and heaven was free of any sorrow and pain, is we were not addicted to these five vices: lust, anger, greed, attachment and ego, because we were soul conscious. If we are body conscious, obviously we will be falling for the sensual pleasures and eventually we will be addicted to those five vices. But there they would be totally soul conscious, which means they are fully awake, because it's the day of Brahma, not only for Brahma and also for Brahmins. So they become deities in heaven. For the first 2500 years, they are fully aware that they are souls and they are deities, and everything, including nature, will be totally under our control while we were in heaven. But after taking several births in heaven for the first 2500 years, we started entering hell. That is when we started experiencing pain, because we fall asleep. We forget that we are souls. We forget that we were deities originally. So we start building temples for the deities and start worshipping it, without even realizing that we were deities originally. So that's why it is called the sleep of ignorance. So God comes in the end to wake us up. That's what God basically does. That is what in Bible it is mentioned as God comes in the end to wake us up from the burial ground. But people think that he will wake up the corpse. No, we are not corpse, we are souls. It is soul that is almost dead. So God reminds us that we are souls. He reminds us that we rule the whole world peacefully and blissfully. And it is time to wake up because it's going to be heaven pretty soon. Because God comes in the last 100 years of Kali Yuga. So Kali Yuga gets destroyed in the end. Only then Satyug can come, because this old world itself is going to be renewed into heaven. So this happens every 5000 years, and God comes in each kalpa towards the end. That's what in religious scriptures it is mentioned as Kalki Bhagavan comes in the end, or the second coming of Jesus Christ. But neither Sri Krishna nor Jesus Christ comes in the end, because they already came. One man can come only once in this entire cycle. Doesn't mean he can't come after that. He will come, but in a totally different form, with a totally different name and totally different role to play. So Sri Krishna's part was over in the very beginning, because he is the first prince of the world. And Jesus Christ, as we all know, he came 2000 years back, and his part was over. But obviously he would be taking rebirth like everybody else. But in the end, it is God Shiva who comes. He doesn't take birth like us as humans. That's why we worship him in the form of Shivling, which means the form of light, because God exists always as a point of light. Of course, we also reside as a point of light in between the eyebrows. So God is also a soul, we are souls. But since he is greater than all of us, he is called the Supreme Soul, Param Atma. And he says we have to constantly remember him to regain the power of purity that we once possessed in the beginning. We have lost it due to our addiction for sensual pleasures. Now we have to constantly remind ourselves that we are not this perishable body, but the imperishable soul constantly. That's something that can't happen very easily. We have to put more and more effort, but again and again we are going to forget. So that's the actual fight that is mentioned as the fight between Durga and Mahishasuran. No, it's the internal fight. Those five vices are within us. We have to remove that totally from us. So it happens mentally. So we have to constantly remember ourselves as souls. It is because of body consciousness that we become addicted to those five vices. So we have to constantly remove the body consciousness with the power of remembrance of God. The more we remember God, the more power we get to conquer these five vices, especially the number one vice, lust. We got to conquer it. So it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. So God gives this knowledge. So people take this knowledge in the last 100 years. So not everybody is going to take knowledge for the whole 100 years. Some gets this knowledge early, some gets this knowledge in the later period. So it depends. Some may have 30 years to practice soul consciousness, some may get 50 years, some get just 5 years, because nobody knows when death comes, right? So before that, we have to become soul conscious. We have to accumulate as much power as possible by remembering God. So what happens is, the more we remember God, the more we can conquer these five vices. So we no longer get disturbed by lust. We no longer get disturbed by angry situations. We no longer gets disturbed by any sort of relations due to attachment. We will no longer be addicted to egoistic attitude. So we will no longer be jealous about anything. How is it possible for us to do that? By remembering God. That's the actual fight. This is the yoga. We have to consider ourselves as a point of light in between the eyebrows, and we have to remember God also as a point of light in the golden red colored world, light world. Or we can imagine God as a point of light, as a star in the golden red colored sky. So if we sit in yoga, so as soon as we start remembering God, we will start getting plenty of thoughts from the outside world, because we have been accumulating them right from our birth. So that's going to be the obstacle for us to stay connected with God. So we got to constantly connect our mind to God, no matter how many obstacles come in between in our mind as waste thoughts. We have to keep on removing it, and we have to be steadfast in connecting our mind to God. So that's the actual fight. So the more time we spend in being with God, the more power we get to conquer those vices. So it depends on how much power we accumulate before we leave this body, before the world gets destroyed. That's going to determine the status that you are going to get in the next birth, in Satyug. So higher the remembrance, higher the status that we are going to get. If the remembrance is going to be lesser, then even the status is going to be lesser. It all depends on the effort of paying attention to remembrance, to being soul consciousness. So to mock this spiritual fight with those vices, in North India during this Navratri, what they do is they will ignite a lamp and they keep it in a pot. So they will keep on pouring oil or ghee to keep it ignited continuously for nine days and nights. So what it actually implies is we are keeping the soul, which is symbolized as light. We are keeping that soul conscious constantly. So we are actually keeping the light in a pot so that it doesn't get disturbed by the atmosphere, by the strong airflow. Likewise, these five vices is called Ravan or Maya or Satan. So we have to protect the light of the soul from the cyclones of Maya. It can take any form. It can take a form of a beautiful girl. Once we see a beautiful girl, if we start thinking, wow, how beautiful she is, that's it. The light goes off, which means we become body conscious, which means we failed. Yes, it happens initially, but still, again, we have to remember as a point of light. So that's the fight. If you can succeed in the very first attempt, then what's the point in celebrating it for 9 days? Actually, it represents the 100 years, not exactly 9 days. And also some they stay awake for 9 nights, and some they will be fasting for 9 days and nights. So the fasting represents the fast of the vices that we take as per the instructions of God. We have to stay away from the vices, and the foundation of all vices is body consciousness. So we have to stay away from that. We have to constantly remind ourselves that we are not this spiritual body, but the imperishable soul that shines like a tiny star in between the eyebrows. We got to constantly say that within our mind. And also we have to remember God as a point of light. And here in South India, we have this habit of keeping golu, which means we will be arranging dolls of deities in 9 steps generally. Sometimes it could be lesser, like 5 steps or 3 steps. So what we basically do is we will keep the highest deity at the top row, and we will be keeping the lowest living being like plants or insects at the lowest step, and we'll be filling the rest of the steps with the living beings that's in between these 2 extremes. So usually the topmost step will be filled with the highest deities like Saraswati, Durga and Parvati and Maha, Vishnu, and the step below that will be filled with Rishi, Muni, like that, and below that there will be the devotees, and below that there will be animals like cows, sheep, like that, and below that there will be little insects, birds, and even below that insects, and below that trees, plants, like that. So people think in the path of devotion that we were initially that plants, then we took rebirth as insects, then we took rebirth as animals, and we then take birth as humans, and by constantly worshipping God we can reach the highest state of Rishi and Muni, and even by doing further intense devotion we can become deity. But the reality is it's not so. God did not create us as plants or insects. Initially God created us as the highest deity, because if God creates us as plants or insects, it's not the praise of God, it's actually the defamation of God, because God has created us as the inferior being, and it is because of our effort we gets evolved. But that's not the case. God creates the perfect world with the perfect human. So that perfect human is called deity. That's it. We were deities in the beginning, like Sri Narayan, Sri Lakshmi. So gradually the soul power gets decreased, just like the mobile battery charge goes off eventually. Similarly, even the charge of soul, it gets drained off gradually. So it takes 5,000 years to almost completely drain off. So at that particular point God comes and he charges us, fills the battery of the soul with full charge. Of course he gives the direction, he doesn't do it on his own. It is our part to fill us with as much power as we want. But of course Maya is going to let you do that independently. It's going to interfere as much as possible. We have to drive it off. So that's the actual fight. So that is what called Navratri. And in South India, on the 9th day we celebrate Saraswati puja. We know Saraswati is the god of education, and she looks very calm, right? Does she look like someone who fights? No. What she does play violin all the time. So what is that violin? That's the violin of knowledge. So we got to keep on thinking about these knowledge points. So God gives this knowledge through Brahma, and that knowledge is called Murli, that is given free of cost in all Raj Yoga meditation centers, and also you can get the Tamil Murli in YouTube if you Google as BK Sarvanakumar Tamil Murli, and actually you can get in any language in YouTube and also in website. You can just Google for it. The Raj Yoga meditation centers is available in all countries of the world. You can Google for the address of the nearest Raj Yoga meditation center in your area. So the actual fight or the result of this fight or the aim of this fight is to stay calm no matter what happens around us. Even if the most beautiful girl of the world comes in front of you, you no longer gets disturbed even a bit, which means you are totally peaceful. No matter what happens to provoke you, you are still peaceful, 100% peaceful. So that is what Om Shanti actually means. Om means I'm a soul. Shanti means, as we all know, peace. I'm a soul and my original character is being peaceful. So we are constantly reminding ourselves as we are the peaceful soul, blissful soul, as long as our concentration is just on this soul. But the minute our attention goes to the outside world, we forget that we are souls. That's when we get disturbed by lust, anger, greed, attachment, ego, and many other things of the outside world. So just like tortoise brings all its limbs into that shell, similarly we have to take our mind from the outside world and we have to focus within as a point of light, and then we have to remember God. So the more effort we put in this yoga, the more is the power we are going to get in the soul. So that's how we stay peaceful forever, no matter what happens around us. That's the true yoga. That is what Saraswati does to become Lakshmi in Satyug, because it is Saraswati that becomes Lakshmi, but in religious texts it's not mentioned so. That's the problem. So if you are doing this effort, you are Saraswati. If you are doing this effort very intensely, there is a good chance that you can become Lakshmi. You can get married to Sri Narayan, or else you can become Narayan yourself and get married to Sri Lakshmi, and they will be the number one king and queen. They will be very beautiful, they were very rich, and they were filled with all divine qualities like peace, love, purity, power. So as I mentioned, in South India, in the top step, we were deities. So slowly we come down the ladder, come down the steps and become what we are today, with no power, becoming slaves of those vices. So we have to conquer those vices by the determined thought, by paying much attention for the soul conscious thoughts. We should not have body conscious thoughts. So for that we have to constantly remind ourselves to be souls, and we have to constantly remind ourselves of the points of knowledge given in Murli daily. So we should never miss the daily Murli, no matter what. And the interesting fact is, it takes 5,000 years for us to for our battery of the soul to get fully discharged, but it takes just 100 years to get fully charged, and that time to charge our battery is now. So don't waste it. rush to the nearest Rajaga meditation center as much as possible, or at least Google for the Murli in your own language and start listening to it and start enjoying the essence of God's teaching. So that's how the soul becomes peaceful and blissful, because soul doesn't become content with any human knowledge. Only the God's knowledge will make the souls fully content. And in South India, actually in all parts of India, on the 10th day they celebrate Vijayadashmi. In some part they celebrate Dasara. So these Navratri, they not only represent the fight between Durga and Mahishasur, and also it refers to the fight between Ram and Ravan. So as I mentioned, they all point to the same incident, that is our fight with those vices within. So on the 10th day, they burn the effigy of Ravan. So we have to burn it within, not externally. Well, that's just a memorial. That's for celebration. That's the path of devotion. This is the path of knowledge. We have to do it. So we just celebrate and worship the deities. Here in the path of knowledge, we practice it and we become the deity. That's the difference between devotion and knowledge. And also in Vijayadashami, especially in North India, they create clay statues, big statues of Durga, and also statues of Ganesh, Kartik, and many statues, Hanuman, and they worship, they decorate those statues for the 9 days, and on the 10th day they will take it to the ocean or river and they sink the statues. What does it actually mean? It means, see, actually it is Vijayadashami. So which means on the 10th day victory is for Durga. So what does it mean? We are actually sinking the statue made of clay. So it represents the body consciousness. On the 10th day, we are totally soul conscious. We have no consciousness of body, which is why they sink the statue, that is body. So what is left? The soul is left. That is, we are fully soul conscious, because as mentioned in Gita, soul cannot be destroyed, cannot be burnt, cannot be washed, cannot be synced. So it is when you sink this body or the consciousness of this body, that is when you become true conqueror of vices. That's how you defeat Mahishasur or Ravan, which is nothing but these vices. So that's how we are celebrating Vijayadashami. So that happens towards the end. That's when the world destruction starts. So that's why people say when God Shiva opens his third eye, the world will get destroyed. Actually, God doesn't have eye. He doesn't have a body. So he opens the third eye of us. What does it mean? What is here? Soul is here. So by becoming fully soul conscious, it means we are opening the third eye of knowledge. So when we are fully soul conscious, we no longer associate ourselves with anything or anybody in this old world, Kali Yuga. So no matter what happens to anything around us, whether it's our relative or our property, we would no longer bother about it, because we would be peaceful and blissful. We would be having visions of heaven. So we would be very happy when the whole world would be very sad because of the world destruction. So that is when they will have visions of us as deities. That's how they start believing God and start remembering God as a point of light. So to mock the effort that we take in the last 100 years, they're celebrating Navratri. Hope you all understand what I mentioned in this video. If you have doubt, you feel free to leave it in the comment. And also please share this video with all your friends and relatives, because nobody is aware of this deep spiritual secret. So share it as much as possible, and if you like this video, do hit on the like button and subscribe to this channel if you haven't subscribed. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you soon with another interesting video. Om Shanti.